Well, you guys know the drill. We like to do a little recap of the episode before we jump into our discussion of it. So this is going to be episode 36 of Worlds Beyond Number Sending. And of course, you can, if you're on the recap, you can find our full discussion linked down below. So we pick up in this episode with Suvi and her little cadre of wizards, name cloaks, Sworn being the most prominent one we know of, traveling to go and try and rescue Silver. Is the long and the short of it. And we last left them basically coming across this foxhole, like this site of a previous battle where there are trenches dug, perhaps a scouting point, but it's abandoned and kind of destroyed at this point. When all of a sudden they hear this screeching noise. Something is charging at them, and it's these little monkey cat-like creatures, the very same ones that attacked Ursulon, if y'all will recall, back in Gauthmai. So we basically pick up and immediately are rolling initiative. And the way combat is handled in Worlds Beyond is very streamlined. It's very just the hits, and we'll talk about this when we get to our discussion. But similarly, I'm only going to hit the highlights for our recap of it here. But basically, immediately, one of Suvi's allies, who we come to find out is named Sully, just gets his jaw ripped off. He's not dead. I think we're told he has 1 hit point left, but he's just immediately ravaged. And then one of the Azure battalion that came with him is just immediately, excuse me,
Easy, buddy.
just had like a frog in my throat. You know what that?
Slow down, man.
I know. Hold on. I'm dying. Okay, I'm sorry about that, y'all. Just get choked up when I think about that poor Azure battalion member that just got immediately sniped. Excuse me. So they get taken out just off the rip. So it's just immediately chaos, and Suvi decides to cast Shatter and is able to hit all 3 of these little monkey creatures, but also decides to just get Sully in it as well, who again has his jaw ripped off and is currently fighting one of them. So she makes the tough call in order to hit all of them, and does. This kills one of the monkey creatures, kills Sully as well, and then damages the other 2 pretty heavily. It's at this point that Sworn like yells because he notices something else, and there is this 18-foot tall like ape that charges into the battle as well. And they say that it has a crest of Bahati carved in between its eyes, like a sigil. And it rushes in and attempts to just smash Sworn, but he is able to block it. One of the Azure battalion members takes out one of the remaining smaller monkeys, and then Suvi actually casts Inflict Wounds via Vandal, her little art demon, and kills the final smaller monkey. And also damages the huge one as well. Sworn tries to cast Hold Person on this massive ape, but it doesn't work. And instead, the ape picks up Sworn and just starts crushing him in its hand. And Brennan describes it very brutally. And he's not dead, but Sworn is not looking good. 3 of Suvi's name-cloaked wizards then cast these like magical azure bolts at the gigantic ape. So there's like 9 arcane missiles basically coming at this guy. That kills the ape, but we find out that this is actually like a shapeshifter, a druid. So his ape form has died, but now he's full health as his like caster form, completely unharmed. But he gets up and immediately just tries to sprint away. But Sworn once again casts Hold Person, and this one works. So the guy like freezes midair and like falls from the trees basically. And so Suvi walks up to him, casts Inflict Wounds once more, and that kills him. And Sworn says, we're not out of the woods yet because like this forest is watching us. So we need to be like extra careful. But combat is over. They dig some graves for all of the bodies, including Sully, when there's a nice little moment between one of the Azure battalion members with the fallen Azure battalion member where they like re-give them this little like symbol. But so they kind of have their quick funeral, and we then cut to Suvi, who takes out the scroll of sending from her pack, the one that I guess I can't remember his name, but they gave it to her as a way to contact I want to say her mom, but I'm blanking on her.
Yeah, the guy who stole the airship left it in case there was emergency. Yeah.
But instead of calling for backup or extraction, she actually sends a message to Ame. So as she's doing this, we swap perspectives to Ame and Ursulon aboard this massive rock, who are flying toward Ursulon's home. The rock is currently very happy because it just ate a whale. But suddenly Ame has Suvi's message appear in her head. And Suvi says, Ame, the way we left things was bad. I don't have time for apologies yet, but for the love you bear me or any sense of duty, I need you both here at the base of Mount Korhai. Ame tells Ursulon about this message and says, hey, like, can we go and just go visit your family afterwards? And Ursulon is disappointed by this, but like hides that from Ame, and he says, "I'll tell the rock." So Ursulon kind of climbs up to the neck of this massive bird and says, "Hey, can we go to Mount Korhai instead?" And the rock asks, "Well, is there a way home for me there?" And Ursulon says he doesn't know. And the rock then asks Ame, and we find out that the Rock has a new nickname thanks to Ame called Firebringer, but she refers to him as Fifi. And he says, Ame, Witch of the World's Heart, if you promise to find me a way home, then we can go there. And Ame does. Ame then responds to Suvi's message and says, we are flying to you. Expect us in hours. Love, Ame. And that's where I'll hand it off to you, my friend.
Yeah. So we cut back over to Suvi. A number of things are happening. One, they inspect the body of the scout, and Brennan basically describes this being like a forward scout who was in charge of this station, this area of the forest. And additionally, this person has a smooth stone that almost, to me, sounded almost like a sending stone, but through, I think, an Arcana check, and I think actually Suvi does an identify spell on it, they come to find out that first of all, that nature itself is bound to the forces of Gauthmai here. And that as they move through this forest, they need to be aware that like the plant life, vegetation, wildlife, and even the rocks themselves are the eyes and ears of Gauthmai. This stone, however, in particular, there are stones that are deep beneath the earth that sort of serve as a magical barrier, an alert system that lets the forces of Gauthmai know when someone is passing through, and that this stone essentially neutralizes that. It allows someone to move back and forth through that that area. Suvi has a dispelling liquid that she got, I think, from the lieutenant in the previous fort, and works it into the stone, is able to break it up into a number of pieces for her party. And then also has Vandal essentially leave a path of ink so that Ame and Ursulon can eventually find them. Also, she inspects Sworn, and Sworn, as Brennan describes, is pretty badly injured, has made like a makeshift splint. And though he's badly injured, he's able to continue on. And there's very much this kind of cool moment of him looking at Suvi, realizing that not necessarily like as a mentor, but as like a guardian of hers, like he gets to experience, like serve her and experience her mission in sort of this honorable way that he really appreciates. Meanwhile, the Rock and Ame and Ursulon approach. They note the weird clouds that have been Brennan's pointed out the entirety of this episode, these like pinkish reddish clouds, which, by the way, Lou Wilson, I think we mentioned in the previous episode, is very much, you know, hey, y'all can just know this is not a good thing if Brennan keeps pointing this out. But the Rock does say that like there's something strange afoot, is very untrusting of these mountains, of the Shroud Mountains, and specifically these clouds, and offers to sort of like set them down at the base of the mountain and then to go to the top of the mountain and wait until Ame returns to make good on her bargain to help Firebringer get home. They're essentially dropped off. They follow the path, and they do in fact find Suvi and her friends. Ame announces herself. They realize that they've that the witch and the wild one have arrived, And I think even Sworn does like an inspection to make there's no magical like deceit or trickery afoot. But they have our party is reunited. They're back together again. And Suvi shares kind of what's happened so far, their mission to get to Absinthe. Ursulon points out like, oh, so that's our mission to rescue Silver. And it's a bit, I think, kind of interesting, like what's unsaid of, Ursulon's not super excited to be here to continue the efforts of the Citadel. But he is asked, I think, by Ame to speak to the wildlife and figure out like what is the safe passage through here? Like, how do we make it through here? He does speak to a very old tree, and the tree, recognizing him as a spirit, basically says, if you're going to navigate through these woods, go to the high places where there's pine trees, because that is the safest place. The birds don't dwell there. The animals aren't there. That would be your best bet for navigating through. And then meanwhile, speaks either him or Ame speaks to the horses and says basically like, hey, can you help us move carefully through here to navigate these woods, which the horses agreed to. All this said and done, around this moment as they're setting out, I think dawn has approached. They see Firebringer up on the mountainside, and then they see the appearance of a being of pure light that Brennan describes as brighter than the sun and identifies this figure as a sorcerer of one of the high houses of Gauthmai. This bright being approaches Firebringer in the sky. There is some spell cast, and then Firebringer is gone, disappears essentially. And that is where our episode ends, episode 36 of The Wizard, the Witch, and the Wild One, Sending. And if you're watching just the recap, we don't split these up. You're watching the recap. Let's get into the... We just split these up. What am I talking about? It's been a while.
We've considered maybe not, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm confused. But anyway, if you're watching just the recap, click the link and let's get into it.